Um, it'll be ran by an NGO called Walk With Me in Tying Vines, and it'll be going to Turkey. There was an earthquake earlier this year in February, and there are a lot of refugees and citizens of that area that were removed from their homes and have no medical infrastructure to seek help when they need it. And so this clinic will be serving that community and provide some much needed relief as that area recovers from their disaster. I would like to now invite Donna McGrew to come up and speak about Shawn and his mission.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Howdy.
Howdy.
I'm Donna McGrew. My husband Mike and I are the Gold Star parents of Major Shawn Campbell, Marine Corps. We're here with our Aggie friends, Kelly Dozier and Pat Garrison. They've been with us the whole time. They're the first people that we called when we got the word that Shawn's helicopter had gone down. Shawn was an Aggie. We didn't know that he was going to join the Marines. We found out when he graduated and he accepted his commission to the Marine Corps because he wanted to fly. And I told him, honey, I would have bought you flying lessons. You didn't have to do that. His major was microbiology, and now he's a Marine. Okay. Hoorah, that's right. But he told me, Mom, I just couldn't see myself in a lab coat for the rest of my life. So he became a Marine, and he flew the biggest helicopter in the arsenal, the 53. It takes 2 full naval aviators to fly that thing. It's like flying a 3-story building. It's huge. This legacy with him, you all have no idea how much it means to us. His legacy for A&M will go on and being pressed into the future because of this. He loved to help people. Before he came here, he was a volunteer firefighter, and he had a heart of gold. I'm going to have to refer to my notes because I'm already lost. Hold on. You know, there's a saying in the Gold Star community. You all know what Gold Stars are, I'm sure. Anybody not know what a Gold Star parent is? Good. I'm sorry that you all know, because you have to walk through some very, very unbelievably difficult times as a Gold Star. But in the Gold Star community, there's a saying that a man dies twice. The second death is when no one remembers his name or no one speaks of him. And this legacy for Shawn will make sure that he doesn't experience that second death. It will press on into the future and carry A&M's legacy and Shawn's legacy with it. He did 3 tours in the Middle East. The first one he flew off the Kearsarge. The second one he was forward observer for the Marine 3-2. And the third time he went back, he helped move the troops when the Army was taking over, and Shawn got to fly some of his Marines out so they could come home. Everybody asks us, was he killed over there? No, he wasn't. Because he was very blessed. Even the time as a forward observer, he was in his bunk, and he was laying down in his bunk, thank God, because a bullet came through and it would have hit him had he been vertical. So we know he was protected. He was killed along with 11 of his men when 2 of the 53s collided off of the shore of Oahu. Excuse me, off the North Shore. of Oahu. There were 12 of them killed, and strangely enough, as big as the Marine Corps is, there were 2 killed from this area. Shawn was the ranking officer. Those were his birds, those were his men. He was well known as an Aggie, though. Everybody that he was with, no matter where he served, knew he was an Aggie. His Aggie call sign, we learned at the memorial, was NAFTA. And the chaplain said, no, it has nothing to do with the trade agreement. It means not another fill in the blank Texas Aggie. And he was so proud of that. Just a second. Gotta catch my breath. One of the reasons I believe this clinic is so important is that Shawn did love to help people. Before he moved up here, as I said, he was a volunteer firefighter. Everybody that he worked with, everybody that he flew with, knew that he was an Aggie. And they also knew that he was a very strong Christian. One of the few people left out of the Pegasus squadron because the death of those 12 aviators pretty much wiped out the squadron. This young man reached out to me and he said, "Ma'am, you know, a lot of people say they're Christians, but Major Campbell, he lived it every day." That's part of his legacy. Another part of his legacy is that between his deployments, he was a helicopter instructor for the Marine Corps at Whiting Airfield near Pensacola, Florida. And that, I believe, was his very favorite duty. He loved mentoring people. He had a funny sense of humor. I can't imagine where he got this. Poor kid, he got my sense of humor. But one of the people that served with him at New River Naval Air Station in Jacksonville, North Carolina. I'm sorry. She spoke with me after she learned about Shawn's death, and she said, "You know, he's the only one that cared whether I knew what was going on in the cockpit or not." Apparently her job didn't put her in the cockpit very much. She was part of maintenance. She said, "He took time with me to tell me what was going on in the cockpit and how everything worked." And then she said, and he was funny. She said, one day at the flight line, all the helicopters were out there and I heard this ruckus. And it was somebody yelling at the top of his lungs, the squadron name, "Condors!" And she said, I looked at it, and yes, it was Shawn. He had this funny cartoon voice. He was sitting in his helicopter and yelling out the window, "Condors!" because that's who they were. And Maggie told me that now, whenever she sees a big bird, she hears that voice in her head yell, "Condors." And that's part of his legacy, too. One of the things that we learned at the memorial in Hawaii, we spoke with a 3-star general who flew in from Okinawa. And he told us that when they got the news that Pegasus had gone down and that Shawn was missing and gone, he said, one of the staff members in my office said, "Oh my, Major Campbell taught me to fly." That was part of his legacy. He loved A&M. He loved God. He loved his Marines, and he loved his 4 children. Those children lost the best person in the world to them. They lost their dad, and we lost our son. One thing that he stipulated in his military will, you know, they all have to do that. They have to fill out a will, was that he wanted to come home to Aggie Land if anything should happen to him. So, you Aggies have welcomed him home. He's buried in the Aggie Field of Honor And our hero, your hero, is home. Semper Fidelis, Semper Pegasus, Gig'em. Okay.
Next, I would like to welcome Miss Donna McGrew, Major Shawn Campbell's mother, to come up and say a few words about Shawn.
Howdy. Thank you. Before I start, I would like to say a word about the drawing that you see. That drawing was made by Michael Gerald Reagan. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. He's done about 9,000 portraits of the fallen for the Gold Stars. He gives back to the community. He does a portrait. This was taken from a picture, and he must have communicated with Shawn somehow. That is Shawn so much. So I wanted to give credit to Mr. Reagan because he found out it was going to be Shawn's birthday on a Thursday. Shawn's birthday was going to be on Saturday, and by Saturday we had the portrait in our hands. So he just really touched our lives with this. Again, I want to thank you, all of you build members, the sponsors. I can't tell you how much this means to us. To know that Shawn's legacy is going to be carried forward, that would be something that he would be very proud of. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for continuing to share his legacy. It's going to be something that will go on as an Aggie for generations to come. And I'm very thankful. I'm very grateful. Shawn was here in 2000 and 2001. I don't know if any of you frequented or knew of Sweet Eugene's coffee shop. Anybody? Shawn may have waited on you. He worked there, and that's where he fell in love with coffee. That man could not pass a Starbucks, I promise you. He had a cup of coffee everywhere he went. So not only did his blood bleed maroon, which it did, I'm sure, but it also bled caffeine. Shawn had done 3 tours in the Middle East. The first tour he flew, by the way, he was a helicopter naval aviator. He wasn't a pilot, he was a naval aviator. And he and 11 of the men that he commanded, and 2 of the birds that he was in charge of, were going on a training mission off the coast of Hawaii. He did all 3 tours in the Middle East and came home fine. He got the dream job in Hawaii, and he wasn't even supposed to fly that night. But they were flying goggles, and they knew that Shawn didn't have much time. None of them had much time flying night vision. So they did what was called a hot swap. Shawn got out of the right seat of Pegasus 32, and they took off and flew into the arms of God that night. I don't know how much you know about the Gold Star community. We have a saying that a man dies twice. The second time is when no one remembers him or speaks his name. And with his legacy, I know that that will not happen to Shawn, and I'm forever grateful for that. Thank you, Aggies. He was killed on January 14th, 2016. And the death of those 12 men pretty much wiped out the Pegasus squadron. There weren't very many left. And one of them, I really think it was the young man that got out when Shawn got in, contacted me later and he said, "Ma'am, I want you to know, there are a lot of people that say they're Christians, but Major Campbell lived it. He knew he was a Christian. And he was a very strong Christian. He loved his men, he loved his children. The only thing that could have separated him from his children was death. And I know they miss him terribly. They lost the only person in the world that couldn't love them any more than he did." You may have seen him here at the rock wall, or the climbing wall, is that what it's called? I think climbing wall. He also worked there. He graduated in 2001 with a degree in microbiology. And he accepted his commission to the Marine Corps graduation. We had no idea. It was a total surprise. He wasn't in the Corps. We didn't know. It was like, what are you doing? And I told him I would have given you flying lessons if that would have helped. But his Aggie heart had been turned to the Marines. And at the time of his death, he had done 17 years in the Marine Corps. He had just completed all of his requirements to make lieutenant colonel. And he was supposed to pin on in March of that year, but he didn't because he was killed in January. He worked very hard. His men loved him. They respected him. They knew who he was as a Christian. They knew how strong he was. He mentored them and he cared for them. He prayed with them and about them. It's been a real eye-opener to us as a Gold Star family. When we hear things from the outside, people that he served with, who've contacted us to tell us about Shawn, because that gave us a glimpse into the kind of man he was, a glimpse into the life he led that we wouldn't have otherwise known. So we're thankful for that. Before I close, I would like to read you something that he wrote from the Middle East. This was when he was the forward observer with the 3-2. He didn't like that very much. He would much have preferred to fly. But this is what he wrote on New Year's, and it was December 30th, 27. It's not very long. New Year's finds us all scrambling to put things into order. For some of us, it's taxes or resolutions, promises of better quiet times with God, or a renewal of a desire to be physically fit. But putting into order things that are by very nature chaotic tends to lead us to unrealistic expectations from ourselves, because when you define for yourself a goal without planning the realistic means to achieve it, that realistic means, it begs the question as to the motivation behind it. My encouragement to you this new year is not to attempt to add something else to your already busy schedule, but instead remove those things which tie up your time and introduce friction into your daily life. Remove those things. Reduce the chaotic nature of your schedule by removing things from your schedule. Doing without things can be just as satisfying as finding a way to do more things. Out here in Iraq, I see families that do without the things that you and I take for granted. My encouragement to you this year is to do without things, but to do without them together. Time together is precious. That was very prophetic. All military members have to fill out a will. And that's hard because it gives you the reality that something really could happen. And something did. Shawn wanted to be buried here in Andyland. He rests today in the Andy Field of Honor. And I thank you, his Andy family, for your support and for continuing his legacy. Our hero, my hero, rests in Andyland. He's home. Thank you.